Yes. Have you come with questions?
Welcome back, Fanfield family. I'm very excited for today's video because after resisting its temptation for weeks, we're finally going to do it. We're going to give in to the dark side of the Force. While the light side is mostly focused on healing, protection, and peace, the dark side, conversely, is all about power. The dark side is filled to the brim with powers that attack, destroy, manipulate, and control. Because of this, the dark side tends to have much flashier powers, things that really stand out on screen. As with our previous entries of light side and neutral powers, the Star Wars wiki is in many places incomplete and inaccurate, and to that end I've had to make some judgment calls to ensure that I'm presenting the most correct information that I can.
Perhaps the archives are incomplete.
Now, dark side powers are a little all over the place in terms of what they do, but in general these powers are attacks on others or a perversion of the natural order of the universe, things that fundamentally alter the way reality should behave. This is why the Sith do not say, "May the Force be with you." They instead say, "May the Force serve you well." It's a different approach and understanding of the Force, not working with the Force, but rather subjugating it to one's own will. Cheating death, damaging and rearranging the fabric of reality, taking from others to improve oneself.
The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
The dark side is traditionally considered evil as it is fundamentally a craving for power, for dominance, for control. Many executions of dark side powers are perversions of the Force and of the natural order, and because of that, the Jedi reject the dark side while the Sith revel in it.
The dark side is strong in me, for I am Sith.
Just to give you an idea of the depravity that the dark side can cause you to sink to, let's look at the case of Darth Malgus. Darth Malgus was a Sith Lord during the era of the Old Republic. During his campaign to combat the Jedi and conquer the galaxy for the Sith, he met a woman, Elena Daru, a slave held in the Geonosis slave pens. Malgus saved her, and she joined his cause, and over time, the two fell in love. Daru begged Malgus to settle down, to leave the warrior lifestyle. Weeks later, while Daru was in the hospital recovering from a battle, Malgus came to the conclusion that his love for her was a weakness, something his enemies could exploit, and to eliminate that weakness, he stabbed the woman he loved through the heart with his lightsaber. The dark side may have a lot of power, but if that's where it leads, I want nothing to do with it. One last note before we get into the list itself. There are a handful of dark side Force powers that have no visual illustration in any official media, but I was able to acquire videos or pictures from things like mods for Star Wars games. The most notable of this is the fantastic Full Force mod for Knights of the Old Republic 2. Whenever I use footage from that mod, I'll put this icon up in the upper right corner of the screen. Alright, on to the list. Before we get into the actual Force powers themselves, I want to discuss something that I've seen asked about before. Why did Darksiders seem to deteriorate over time? A lot of Sith that we see look pasty and pale, with yellow eyes, veins, and for the particularly evil individuals, their bodies are even starting to decay and rot. The answer lies in what the dark side itself is. It's a perversion, an evil twisting of a natural energy to the dark whims of those who wield it. It is malevolence, hate twisted into a power source. Darth Bane explained this physical degradation was because most flesh and blood and bone could not channel the dark side's immense power indefinitely, and eventually, that power ate away at the physical form. We see that dark side users who are more surface level, like Count Dooku who wasn't nearly as deeply evil as someone like Darth Sidious, aren't really affected this way. Dooku looked basically indistinguishable from a man of his age that had no connection to the Force. Sidious, on the other hand, who was actually 20 years younger than Dooku, looked decades older. Darth Zash, a Sith sorceress during the Old Republic era, looked like a walking corpse with how gaunt she was. This causes an issue for those who really delve into the dark side, as eventually the body will fail and that results in death, so another method of survival is necessary. We'll talk about a few of those in this video. Okay, now on to the first dark side power, which is bleeding is less an actual power and more a ritual. In Disney canon, when a Darksider, usually a Sith, is ready to take up the iconic red lightsaber blade that the Sith always use, they take a normal kyber crystal, then pour all of their hate and pain and fear into the crystal, turning it red. Darth Sidious explained this to Darth Vader, saying, "Corrupt the kyber crystal, teach it your pain, teach it your anger, hear it sing a hymn of darkness, make it bleed." Traditionally, the Sith demanded that this crystal must be taken from a Jedi that the prospective Sith had killed, as we've seen with Vader taking the green crystal from Jedi Master Kirak Infila. Vader took this green crystal back to his castle on Mustafar, and, surrounded by the pain of everything that had happened to him on the planet, he bled the crystal. As we discussed in the Light Side Powers video, there was a process that mostly reversed this called purification, where a light side user can meditate on a bled crystal to heal it, turning it white. Ahsoka took the bled crystals of the sixth brother and purified them to create her famous white blades. Most recently, we've seen it in the Acolyte with the bleeding of Jedi Master Soul's blue lightsaber. I'm not really a fan of this, as it seems to be an unconscious bleeding, little more than a byproduct of the rage and hate present without even removing the crystal. If this sort of thing was possible, why didn't Anakin's blue blade turn red during his duel with Obi-Wan on Mustafar? Maybe it's because here the crystal is partially exposed and is touching her hand? We see bleeding again in Star Wars Jedi Survivor.
The battle was horrific. My home, and they just expected me to throw it away? I refused to obey and was betrayed by the one I trusted most. No, stop!
Also known as Feed on Darkseid, Consume Essence allowed its user to feed on the negative emotions within those nearby to amplify their own power. Fear, anger, hate, it could all be drawn upon to strengthen the user. The Sith Emperor Vitiate greatly increased his power by feeding on the feelings of fear and agony from public executions and torture. A corpse vision was a dark side manifestation of the past, usually designed to torment the caster's victims. Obi-Wan was afflicted by this power, and he saw visions of Qui-Gon telling him that he was a disappointment. This ability allowed a Darksider to throw a bolt of pure Darkside energy at their target. It's very similar to a power we'll discuss in a little bit. The light side has Inspire, which boosts the morale of the user and their allies. The dark side, on the other hand, has Crush Opposition, which erodes the will of the user's foes. These two powers, I suspect, were designed as a way for users of the appropriate force alignment to imitate the abilities of Battle Meditation, a neutral power that was incredibly rare. This is a power that is, in theory, neutral, but was created by the Sith, and its actual applications have only ever been dark side. Cryokinesis drew heat away from an object or enemy, rapidly reducing the temperature. Living targets froze, their blood vessels filling with ice crystals, causing hemorrhages, and ultimately leaving the victim as nothing more than a frozen husk. A dark energy trap was a field of pure dark side energy created through Sith sorcery, something that can get its own video if there's interest. To those able to recognize such things, it appeared as a shimmering field of purple energy. Even a trained Force user could be ensnared, keeping them in place for hours or more, while those untrained in the Force could be trapped indefinitely. We see something visually similar in Knights of the Old Republic too. In the secret tomb on Korriban and in Frida Nad's tomb on Duxon, there are shimmering purple fields. In the former instances, they seem to induce visions in Meetra Surik, and she'll see moments from her past, such as the time she disobeyed the Jedi Order to enter the Mandalorian Wars. In the latter case, they're nexuses of dark side power that the player can meditate on to cleanse, gaining a temporary bonus to their strength and constitution if they succeed. If the player is on the dark side, however, they can choose to bask in the dark side's power, gaining access to a new, randomly chosen dark side force power. A dark ritual, dark side ritual, or dark illusion attacked a subject's mind, afflicting them with dark side visions even across great distances. To the victim, these visions appeared truly real, so much so that they could feel pain, and if they were killed in the vision, they would die in reality. The ritual itself required two users, usually the master and apprentice pair of Sith Lords, one of whom shared a connection with the intended target. For example, Darth Sidious and Darth Tyrannus used a dark ritual during the Clone Wars to afflict Yoda, the former master of Darth Tyrannus, with horrible visions. To perform the ritual, one of the two participants would produce a single drop of blood on an altar, then the two shocked that drop with Force lightning while chanting in Balk, a language adapted from the ancient Sith dialect.
We shall, however, use the strong bond that once existed between you and your master to allow us to see things that we otherwise could not. It is an old art of the dark side. I need but a drop. Kinte Katsuska Sutta Shwituska. Kinte Katsuska Sutta Shwituska. Justin Jedi. Justin Jedi. Now, concentrate on Master Yoda.
Usually, when someone says the word healing, you don't think of the dark side. Healing is, inherently, an ability tied to goodness and light. However, the dark side
finds a way.
Dark Transfer was the dark side's answer to Force healing. By pulling on the Force's nature as life, commanding it to obey, a user of Dark Transfer could bring a subject back from the brink of death, or even resurrect those that had recently died. Cade Skywalker, descendant of the legendary Luke Skywalker, had an instinctual affinity for this ability, and Darth Krayt learned it from him. Krayt became so gifted with this ability that he was able to bring himself back after he died. The ability required the user to see, or at least sense, the shatter points of their subject's injury, then exert the force to mend those cracks. Of course, the opposite was also true, and through this ability, by applying pressure with Force Lightning, these cracks could be exacerbated and even detonated. Darkshear is a fascinating ability that is rather underdeveloped. Also known as Spear of Midnight Black, which would be an awesome band name, Darkshear called deeply on the dark side of the Force to create a spear, forged from pure darkness. The weapon itself was invisible, but very tangible, and could be used as a melee weapon or hurled at the opponent. There is no official visualization of Darkshear, as it has only ever appeared in the novelization of Dark Forces Jedi Knight, used by Kyle Katarn to kill the Dark Jedi Baka Seka. However, the Full Force mod does have the ability. Curiously, there is no light side equivalent of this ability, though the Full Force mod has one for us. Arrow of White Dawn. I debated including this in the light side powers video, but it's not canon for Disney's canon or Legends, so it didn't feel right to include it as anything more than a footnote here. One of the most fiendishly wicked abilities out there, Deadly Sight harnessed the user's rage and hatred into pure destructive power. When used, Deadly Sight injures everything within the user's field of vision. At its weakest, it can burn and blister skin, and at its most powerful, it can not only kill, but vaporize targets. The ability was difficult to sustain for long as it was quite tiring, but in the right situation it could not only be an effective way to deal with an entire crowd of foes in moments, but to intimidate any onlookers. I mean, think about it. How terrifying is it for someone to walk into a room and look all your foot soldiers to death? Befitting its dark side nature, it was indiscriminate. It affected every living thing in the user's field of view, regardless of whether they were enemies, innocent bystanders, or even allies. Officially, we've only ever seen it used once, in Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight, but the Full Force mod comes through for us once again with an awesome display. Man, these dark side powers are great for band names. Death Magic was a family of dark side abilities used by the Presagers of Hakote. By using the fresh blood of living sacrifices, Death Magic permitted the user to see visions of the future.
I can see the future!
The ability required proximity to a dark side force nexus, and certain individuals could serve as conduits to amplify the ability to see every possible future. A young Dooku served as a conduit while on a mission to Asusto, and he saw hundreds or even thousands of potential futures, including a vision of Darth Sidious, as well as a vision of the Jedi Order conquering the Republic. Also known as a mind probe, Drain Knowledge allowed a user to pull knowledge from a subject's mind. The ability tore into the subject's psyche to access information, and the process was so painful and violent that it could permanently damage the subject psychologically.
No one has been able to get out of you what you did with the map. Where is it? Where is it? It's in a droid, a BB unit.
Now, there are some things I need to know, and you're going to help me.
I ain't telling you anything.
It is not up to you. Your mind will speak, or it will break. Tell me, who is this? Ahsoka Tano.
Channeling anger and hate into a machine, a Darksider could override the programming and, to a limited extent, reprogram it. Droids, computers, anything that had circuitry could realistically be manipulated, though it could not completely rework a system's programming. There had to be some capacity for the new behavior in the existing core. More intelligent droids, things like HK series assassin droids, protocol droids, and the like, could resist the ability. Energy storms, sometimes called force storms, were massive hyperspace wormholes created by using the dark side to tear apart the fabric of reality. These vast wormholes could destroy entire fleets of ships, throw objects across vast distances, and ravage the surfaces of entire planets. Once created, however, these wormholes were almost impossible to control and required total mastery of many different force disciplines. Darth Sidious lost control of one he created, and it ended up consuming him and his entire fleet. The Dark Staff, an ancient Sith artifact, was able to create such storms and was known to have created one during the Battle of Almaz during the New Sith Wars. Darth Sidious discovered the technique, and he described it in the Book of Anger, the first entry in his Darkside Compendium. The ability required an immense amount of power in the Darkside to use, and even more to maintain. It's likely that very few individuals in galactic history had the necessary power. The goal of any true Sith is immortality. As we discussed above, the dark side rots and erodes the body, so under normal circumstances, a Sith cannot be immortal. There are two exceptions, however, one of which we'll discuss soon, and the other is essence transfer. One of the most feared Sith Lords in history, Darth Endedu, said essence transfer is the secret of eternal life. The physical body will always weaken and fail, yet it is nothing but a shell or vessel. When it is time, it is possible to transfer your consciousness, your spirit, into a new vessel. And that's accurate. That's what essence transfer is, moving one's spirit, one's consciousness, one's essence into a new body. When a sufficiently powerful Darksider died, if they had made the proper preparations, their spirit could transfer into a new vessel. Darth Sidious famously used clone bodies in Legends to become the Emperor Reborn, but with enough force of will, the disembodied spirit could take over any host and overpower them to take full control. This is what Sidious planned to do in Rise of Skywalker, have Rey strike him down. In that moment of anger, of giving in to the darkness, Rey's spirit would be vulnerable, enough for Sidious to slip in and take her over.
You want to kill me? That is what I want. Kill me, and my spirit will pass into you. You will be Empress. We will be one.
Sidious is, by no means, the only practitioner of the ability, however. The Sith Lord Karnus Mur fused his spirit into his amulet, the Mur Talisman, allowing him to effectively live forever and to possess anyone that put the talisman on. Vitiate, the Sith Emperor, was probably the individual who got the most use out of the ability. He reigned for over a millennium, shifting bodies when necessary to prolong his life. He even established an entire order known as the Emperor's Voice, which was a coveted position in the Sith Empire, and this position was held by whoever was serving as his host. Vitiate perfected essence transfer so thoroughly that he could possess a willing subject without suppressing their will. He could exist without a body for extended periods without fading away or succumbing to madness, and could even maintain control over thousands of bodies simultaneously. Exar Kun bound his spirit to the Massassi temples on Yavin 4, allowing him to persist for thousands of years, from his death 3,996 years before A New Hope to around 11 years after it. Now, the process of essence transfer is not pleasant. Sidious said of the experience, "The dying is painful. The transition is not an enjoyable experience, but it is a small price to pay for eternal life." It destroyed the original body if it wasn't already destroyed, and if the transfer failed for any reason, the spirit was dragged screaming into the Star Wars equivalent of hell, chaos. The other method of immortality through the dark side, we only know of one user of eternal hatred, the Lord of Pain, Darth Sion. By pulling the dark side into himself, he could hold his body together even after injuries that should be fatal. After many years of this, Sion's body was horribly scarred and disfigured. Atten Rand, one of Mitra Surg's companions, described Sion's appearance as though he sleeps with vibroblades. His skin was cracked and broken, his right eye was damaged beyond repair, and the medical officer on board the Harbinger described Sion as,
"His flesh is cracked and scarred, and I'm registering several thousand fractures in his skeleton, as if each bone was splintered repeatedly over time, then put back together. Judging from the scar tissue, I believe these wounds took place before his death. If so, he must have been in constant pain. I have no idea what's been keeping him together."
This method of immortality did seem to be true immortality. Sion did not die until Mitra Surik eroded his will and convinced him to let go. I have a whole video on Darth Sion in the Out of the Spotlight series, and I'll put a link to that in the description.
I see hatred.
A dark side variation on pyrokinesis, which we discussed in the Neutral Powers video, fiery energy created vivid blue flames that could be used to box a subject in and bind them. It created a physical manifestation that allowed its one known user, Darth Sidious, to briefly access the world between worlds where Ezra Bridger was, though thankfully Ahsoka Tano was able to force Sidious out. The thought of a Sidious that can move freely through time is honestly quite terrifying.
I can't go with you.
Perhaps I can.
While we discussed the neutral version of this ability last time, Force Blast also had a far more powerful dark side variation. By launching concentrated pulses of pure dark side energy at enemies, a user could inflict devastating amounts of damage. Due to the pure dark side energy at play, the user would often end up with burned hands, though they felt no pain. Felucian shamans could amplify this ability to the sickening blast variant, which not only inflicted damage, but induced severe nausea. Force Choke, also known as Force Grip in certain media, is one of the most iconic Darkseid powers in all of Star Wars, and one of the first Darkseid powers we ever saw on screen. Darth Vader was fond of the ability, which involved telekinetically constricting the target's throat, strangling them.
Or giving you clairvoyance enough to find the rebels' hidden fort.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
The ability had a variety of uses depending on the power applied. Low-level applications could suffocate the target, stronger applications could lift the target up off the ground to hold them in midair while choking them, and with full power, the ability could simply snap the target's neck. Generally, the victim's hands instinctively went to their throat, trying in vain to claw away the invisible constriction.
Be careful not to choke on your aspirations, Director.
While it was usually performed in relatively close proximity, Vader demonstrated that as long as he could see his target, such as on a viewing screen, he could choke them.
Lord Vader, the fleet has moved down to flight speed and we're preparing to...
You have failed me for the last time, Admiral.
Yes, my lord.
Make ready to land all troops beyond their energy field.
This could theoretically allow Vader to force choke a victim regardless of distance. If he could see his target in any capacity, he could choke them.
Lord Vader, we're out of light speed and...
You have failed me for the last time, Admiral. Didn't know I could choke you through the TV, did you? But I can't.
Force Clouding was a Darkseid variant of Force Cloak, and allowed a user to hide their Darkseid aura so thoroughly that even the Jedi could not sense it. This was, of course, most famously used by Darth Sidious during his many meetings with the Jedi up to and during the Clone Wars. By pulling their darkness into themselves, a Sith could negate that cold presence of the dark side so effectively that it was undetectable, though they could still strike at a moment's notice. A horrible mind-affecting ability, this subjugated a foe's mind, forcing them to fight for the caster, all the while draining their life. Sidious was fond of this, turning his enemies against one another, and Mara Jade, during her time as an Emperor's Hand assassin, used this frequently. Easily one of the most brutal and violent applications of telekinesis, Force Crush lifted a single target into the air and applied intense pressure from all sides, crushing the target. While the Jedi did know of this power, few used it and even fewer used it on living creatures, as it was, at its core, a very dark application of telekinesis. Mace Windu crushed General Grievous's lungs in Legends just before the start of Revenge of the Sith, which is the Legends explanation for Grievous always coughing. Anakin used Force Crush on a Skakoan scientist while on Nelvon after learning of the horrible experiments the scientist had been conducting on a local tribe. Darth Traya was known for using Force Crush, as she was massively strong in the Force, but her advanced age left her less physically imposing. Mitra Surik also learned this power if she was on the dark side during the events of Knights of the Old Republic 2, though this is a non-canon version of events. Depending on the player's level, it can be the single most damaging effect in the game, 1 to 10 points of damage per player level, and at max level of 50, it can absolutely demolish pretty much any foe. Galen Merrick was well known for using this to crush vehicles such as AT-STs and even TIE fighters. Last time, we talked about a neutral power called Force Burst. This is effectively a dark side version of that, but cranked up a few notches. Force Destruction focused the user's dark side energy into a concentrated blast, which was then fired from the hand. Anyone directly hit by it was immediately vaporized, and anything that didn't take a direct hit was blasted aside. It was a tiring ability, and few users could execute the ability more than a few times before needing to rest. Vitiate was known to use Force Destruction, as was the Dark Jedi Jarek when he fought Kyle Katarn in the Valley of the Jedi on Ruusan. Galen Merrick seems to have used an ability similar to this, though his version lacked the disintegration power. One of the most fiendish powers out there, Force Drain allowed a Darkside user to draw on a foe's vitality, or even that of an ally in some cases, and use that drained power to fuel themselves. There were 3 primary abilities under the Force Drain heading: Force Diminish, Drain Force, and Drain Life. Diminish fed more on the subject's vitality, their constitution, and could actually enfeeble and exhaust the victim to the point of death. Drain Force ripped the force energies from the user's target and granted it to the user, replenishing their reserves of force energy. Finally, Drain Life pulled the life essence itself from the target, healing the caster proportionally to the life drained. There were a few variations of this. First, the basic Drain Life hit a single target, draining them of life and restoring that of the user. The next step was an ability called Death Field, which targeted all nearby foes and, consequently, restored much more health. Next, we have Darth Sidious's variant of Force Drain, which he used on Rey and Kylo Ren, pulling on their connection in the Force and using it to not only heal himself, but actually reverse the corruption of the dark side that had eroded his body.
The power of two restores the one true Emperor.
You can see his decayed body regenerating as he absorbs their life forces, most notably his milky white atrophied eyes turning back to their old glowing yellow. Finally, and without question most impressively, we have the unique drain of Darth Nihilus. Nihilus was, like Meetra Surik, a wound in the Force, a gaping maw of hunger, of pain that could only be temporarily quenched by devouring life itself.
He is a wound in the Force, more presence than flesh, and in his wake, life dies, sacrificing itself to his hunger.
Darth Nihilus was the Lord of Hunger, and his abilities with Force Drain were unprecedented and never matched since. His sheer hunger in the Force was such that his own body cannibalized itself, leaving him mere presence bound to his robes and mask, and yet he persisted, always craving more. To him, Force-sensitive individuals were more filling, so he hunted Jedi, and on the Miraluka world of Katar, he set foot on the world's surface and devoured the life energy of every living thing on the planet, killing everything, with only one survivor, a Force-sensitive Miraluka named Visas Mar. A dark side variation of the basic mind trick, Force Fear, as you'd expect, instilled fear into the subject, greatly inhibiting their ability to fight or even think rationally. Fear is the least ability of the three levels of the power, and it silently affects a single target. The next step is Force Horror, which targets all foes nearby and instills more intense panic. The final stage, however, is the most insidious. Force Insanity afflicts all foes in an even larger radius and induces complete and total terror in all subjects, making them so struck with fear that they are reduced to gibbering catatonia, frenzied madness, and deranged mania. An advanced dark side application of telekinesis, Force Kill targeted the victim's organs, usually specifically targeting the heart. Darth Bane used this ability on his own father, imagining a hand squeezing the man's heart, which resulted in a fatal heart attack. Dooku was also known to use this power, and on Korriban, he struck the heart of a black market dealer, killing her instantly. Alright, I know why you're really here. You're here for that. So let's talk about the most iconic Darkseid Force power, the one you immediately think of when I say Darkseid power, the one that's in the thumbnail of this video. Let's talk about Force Lightning. Force Lightning is, of course, the Sith art of blasting lightning from one's fingertips to electrocute enemies. It could be used to injure, to kill, or even to just cause pain. Some individuals could even throw their victims back with blasts of lightning. Darth Plagueis said of the ability,
"A Jedi sufficiently strong in the Force can be trained to produce facsimile, but not true Sith lightning, which, unabated, has the power not only to incapacitate or kill, but to physically transform the victim. Force lightning requires strength of a sort only a Sith can command because we accept consequence and reject compassion. To do so requires a thirst for power that is not easily satisfied. The Force tries to resist the callings of ravenous spirits, therefore it must be broken and made a beast of burden. It must be made to answer one's will, but the Force cannot be treated deferentially. In order to summon and use lightning properly, you will someday have to be on the receiving end of its power as a means of taking the energy inside yourself."
This implies that there is, at the ability's core, a requirement of a desire to hurt and kill the target, a rejection of any kind of mercy or compassion.
There is no mercy.
Now, before we get into the different applications of Force Lightning, let's talk about color. Everyone knows the iconic blue lightning. This is the most basic version. Individuals who aren't that deep into the dark side or are not that gifted with lightning usually conjure blue lightning. Blue is, therefore, the most common color. Count Dooku, Darth Malak, Darth Bandon, and many, many others conjure only blue lightning. The next step up is purple lightning. Purple lightning requires a deep affinity with the dark side and a natural talent for lightning. Darth Sidious was the most iconic user of purple lightning, but Darth Bane and Darth Nox also wielded purple lightning. Starkiller, after pushing his talents with lightning to their limit, was able to use purple lightning as well. This lightning seems to be a cut above blue in terms of power, and Sidious has implied that he could incinerate people with it, reducing them to nothing but ash. Green lightning is usually associated with the Witches of Dathomir. Mother Talzin used green lightning, though it's unclear if this is true Force lightning or if it's just something visually similar conjured by Night Sister magic. The highest form of lightning is red. Red lightning is not something that can be learned, it must be a part of you from the day you're born. Darth Plagueis' master, Darth Tenebrous, was able to use red lightning, but it's extremely rare outside of pure Force beings like the son of Mortis.
Weak for me, old man.
When Darth Nihilus was finally killed by Meetra Surik, his body persisted for a few minutes before erupting into bloody smoke and bursts of red lightning. I imagine that if Darth Vader had never lost to Obi-Wan on Mustafar, when he learned Force lightning it would have been red given his vast power in the Force. We don't see red lightning that often, and when it does show up, it denotes a uniquely gifted Force user. As you can imagine, this kind of lightning, being as rare as it is, was insanely powerful. Through a few mods for Skyrim, I've been able to simulate it here, just for your extra enjoyment. We've also seen a handful of other unexplained colors. The Hidden One used white lightning, and members of the Eternal Empire used lightning of an orange hue. One unique color was Jaina Solo's Force lightning. She didn't use blue or purple or even red. Her lightning was black. This has only ever been used by Jaina Solo and only ever in novel form, so we don't have any proper visual media of it. However, I have a special treat for you. A very good friend of mine has a Sith character that she uses for a Star Wars themed role-playing game, and her character, Lady Alie Vorzarin, actually uses black lightning. I can actually show you art of that black lightning, though as per her request, I'll only show a close-up of the hand casting it, as she would prefer to keep the rest of the image to herself. Now, bear in mind, this is a fan representation, so it may not look exactly like what Jaina Solo's black lightning was intended to look like. Okay, so those are the colors. Let's get into applications and variations of lightning. First, of course, is the basic lightning, bolts of electricity from the caster's fingertips. This is by far the most common, and was usually one of, if not the first version of lightning that most practitioners learned. The first variant of this is Force Shock, which, depending on the particular media you're getting your information from, was one of two things. First, as seen in Knights of the Old Republic, a weaker, single blast of lightning designed to inflict damage and cause a bit of pain, but not nearly as strong as more powerful variants. The other interpretation is a spark of lightning that tracked a nearby foe, causing a few seconds of pain. On the other side of things, Force Storm was a more powerful variation of lightning. By raising one's hand upwards as the ability was used, the lightning would shoot up, then arc back down to strike all nearby foes. Revan was quite fond of this ability, especially during his time as a Sith Lord. On Exegol, with the power of the planet's dark side energies flowing through him, Darth Sidious was able to unleash an amplified version of Force Storm that struck the entire Resistance fleet above. Force Tempest created a swirling field of lightning around the user, striking any foes that came near. Chain Lightning was a variation that caused the lightning to jump from the initial target to others nearby. Sith Barrage shot a bolt of lightning up from the ground and into the target. Galen Merrick was able to use lightning in a variant of Force Weapon, a neutral power we discussed last time. Using this ability, he could shroud his lightsaber in lightning. Lightning Shield was a more defensive application. By surrounding oneself in a sphere of Force lightning, the user could protect themselves from melee attacks, and any enemy nearby would be struck by the lightning if they got too close. Now, what's better than a shield?
A grenade!
That's right, Strax. Now go sit in the corner. Lightning Grenade was an ability developed by Galen Merrick, Vader's secret apprentice. After lifting a target with the Force, Merrick blasted them with lightning, charging them up, then threw or dropped them. Upon contact with any object or person, the charged victim exploded in a burst of lightning. A more powerful version of this was Lightning Bomb, where Merrick charged the victim up repeatedly until they exploded, shocking anyone nearby. Sith Seeker, another power developed by Galen Merrick, was effectively a combination of Force Push and Force Lightning. First, he used Force Push, creating a telekinetic burst, then immediately shot lightning into it, making a sphere of lightning that hunted down a target and exploded on impact. Lightning Burst centered the lightning inside oneself, which would then arc out at any enemies that approached. An unnamed variant of Force Lightning that I refer to as Lightning Fan was shown in the Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy games. It created a wide-spanning fan of lightning in front of the user and struck anything caught in the wide spread. Now, before we talk about the last few applications of lightning, let's discuss something that I see a lot of people ask about. Why do we never see Vader use Force Lightning? The simple answer is that he couldn't. Not because he wasn't strong enough to learn it, but simply because he had no way to properly safely channel it. Remember, Force Lightning is channeled through the hands first and foremost, and Vader lost his right arm to Count Dooku and his left to Obi-Wan on Mustafar. Because his arms were mechanical replacements, he couldn't conduct the Force through them specifically. Even if he tried, Sidious designed Vader's suit to be particularly weak to lightning so he could easily put Vader down if Vader tried to overthrow him, so it's likely that any lightning conjured even touching Vader's armor would have damaged it. Okay, we have two more variants to talk about. First up is the only version Vader was able to use, and that's Kinetite. Kinetite was a curious ability that involved focusing lightning into a sphere and throwing it at an enemy. It didn't shock, but rather impacted like a solid object. Vader was only ever able to use this once on the planet of Mimban when in close proximity to a Force-amplifying crystal. Finally, Force Maelstrom or Force Bombard combined elements of protection bubbles, telekinesis, and lightning. After surrounding themselves in a bubble of the Force, the user telekinetically threw any loose objects around, pelting foes with them and accompanying blasts of Force lightning. Darth Sidious was the most notable practitioner of this ability, though his Shadow Guard showed some skill with it, and Darth Malgus was also known to use it. Force Lightning is, by its very nature, iconic, and there's a reason it's so famous. It's just that damn cool.
Zap, buddy, zap, zap!
Force Net created strands of pure darkside energy and bound the intended target, ensnaring them. These bands were unbreakable and formed a mesh around the target that not only held them in place, but temporarily severed their connection to the Force and drained them of strength. An ability created by the curious Sith Lord Darth Vectivus, who never lost himself in the darkness, Force Phantoms, also called Sith Phantasms, were created through a darkside ritual and projected across the galaxy. The ability required the draining of Force energy from other living beings, but once created, these Phantoms could physically interact with the world and could not only provide sensory information back to the summoner, but would enact the summoner's will. Force Rage is a power very emblematic of the dark side itself. By pulling on one's deepest fear, pain, and hate, a Darksider could convert those emotions into pure power, boosting strength, speed, agility, endurance, and ferocity, making them far stronger and faster. However, it could not be sustained for long, and when the rage ended, the user was left significantly exhausted for a while, meaning that you had to eliminate every threat in the area before the effect ended, or else...
You sucking big doo-doo!
Due to the ability's nature, it was counted among the powers that induced the most temptation to the dark side, and very few Jedi were able to use it safely without falling. Jaden Korr, apprentice of Kyle Katarn, was one of very few who could use the power regularly without succumbing to the dark side's call. The clone of Galen Merrick was able to channel Force Rage for brief moments, greatly improving his striking power, range, and even imbuing a bit of lightning into it. While Force Rage focused all of that anger and pain and fear inward as power, Force Scream did the opposite. By channeling their negative emotions, a Darksider could unleash a horrible shout that not only inflicted sonic damage on objects and living beings nearby, but also induced fear. While some users could manifest it at will, it also sometimes occurred when the user was overcome with rage, grief, or frustration, like Vader's horrible scream of agony when he learned that his wife was dead.
Where is Padme?
It seems in your anger, you killed her.
Do you hear that? That is the cry of utter despair of a man that is completely broken. Sidious iconically used the ability before engaging the Jedi sent to arrest him.
It's treason, then.
Mitra Surik and her Force-sensitive companions were capable of this as well, unleashing Force screams on targets and even in an omnidirectional wave. Force Slow clouds the target's mind, slowing them both physically and mentally, greatly reducing their ability to react in battle. It had two more advanced forms as well, Force Affliction, which reduced the target's other physical attributes significantly, and Force Plague, which actually poisoned the target. In the Neutral Powers video, we talked about Crucitorn, an ability used to control, lessen, or even negate pain. This ability, fitting its name of Inflict Pain, is the opposite. A Force user could utilize this ability to directly cause their target horrible, incapacitating agony. This pain continued as long as the caster focused on the ability. Of course, if the victim was able to use Crucitorn, they could lessen this pain.
Okay.
No, not that kind of mask. Mask was an ability under the heading of Sith Alchemy, something I'll touch on later but really deserves its own video, and allowed a user to reshape the appearance of a subject on a molecular level. As with most Sith Alchemy, the true effects of this ability were limited only by the alchemist's skill, craftsmanship, and imagination. Identifying features could be hidden, age could change, disfigurations could be hidden or added, even the subject's species could be superficially altered. The most famous example, of course, is Darth Sidious, who was horribly disfigured by the power of the dark side and used a mask to appear as the gentle, mild-mannered Senator Palpatine. When Mace Windu reflected Sidious's lightning back at him, the lightning effectively shorted out the mask, melting it away to reveal the true Sidious underneath. It didn't disfigure him, it simply peeled away his mask.
You must die! I have the power to save the one you love! Don't let it kill me! I can't hold it any longer. I can't. I'm weak. Too weak. Help me!
Meku Deru granted its user an intuitive understanding of machinery, allowed them to impose their will upon all manner of machines, and could be used to fuse mechanical parts to a living being. This ability also allowed for the creation of horrible fusions of machine and flesh known as techno-beasts, which could really be the heart of a horror movie. Theoretically, Maul's spider-like robotic body that he crafted in his madness on Lotho Minor may have been an unconscious application of Meku Deru. A telepathic technique calling upon the dark side, Memory Rub erased or altered a subject's mind. The implications of this ability are truly terrifying. After all, what are we but our accumulated memories, our experiences? Being able to change or eliminate aspects of one's memory would fundamentally change who they are, to say nothing of the possibility of committing a horrible act upon someone against their will, then erasing their memory of it. The Father used this ability on Anakin Skywalker to erase his memory of his future as shown to him by the Son.
But I will cause so much pain.
If there is to be balance, what you have seen must be forgotten.
Also known by its much more metal name of Torture by Chagrin, Memory Walk reached into a target's mind and forced them to relive their worst memories over and over. Imagine the worst things that have ever happened to you played over and over, experiencing them, the pain of loss, the fear, the anger. It's like Groundhog Day, but every loop gets worse and worse until your only hope for peace is the release of death. Dark side apparitions could take hold of a living host and control their actions directly, using the Force through them. Vitiate, as we mentioned above, was able to take over subjects to prolong his life for thousands of years, but that was while he was still alive. A better example is Marka Ragnos possessing Tavian Axmis. After her defeat, Ragnos left her body, killing her.
You will kneel before me, Jedi.
Impossible. I will return, Jedi. One day I shall return and annihilate you all.
This ability's true name is... yeah, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Instead, I'll refer to it by its translation, Suppressed Thought. As a Sith power, Suppressed Thought allowed the user to overwhelm and then control the mind of a victim. There was no incantation or gesture, it could be activated simply by being in the presence of the caster. This control was total and absolute, and unlike the mind tricks we discussed last time, the victim really had no way to resist. They could be commanded to take actions that would put them in direct danger, or even to end their own lives. I told you we'd talk about this. While the Jedi had Serenity, an ability that let them meditate to center themselves and improve effectiveness in battle, the dark side had its own version. Seethe, as the name suggests, allowed a user to focus on their own seething anger, hate, fear, and other negative emotions to amp themselves up. While we see Qui-Gon kneeling to meditate to use Serenity, Maul used Seethe by pacing back and forth, focusing on his hatred for the Jedi for everything they stood for. Sith alchemy is a big topic and really deserves its own video. If there's interest, I'll make that video at some point, so let me know down in the comments if you want to see it. I will touch on it a bit here though, as it is important enough to mention. Sith alchemy is the dark side art of permanently manipulating an item or living being. As the Jedi see it as an act of imposing one's will on the Force itself, they rejected it entirely. Many early Sith used alchemy to imbue weapons with dark side power. Naga Sadow infused his blade with a poison effect that could eat away at a target even with the smallest of cuts. It could also be used on living creatures. The Sith used Sith alchemy to create mutated animals to serve their purposes, such as Rancor dragons, which were slightly smaller than true Rancors but had flight-capable wings. Sith war behemoths, Sith war worms, and Sith leviathans were all creations of Sith alchemy. It could also be used horribly on corpses, creating things like Korriban zombies and Sith undead, and may even have been the origin of the fearsome Terentatek, creatures who preyed almost exclusively on Jedi. Also known as Force Storm, though I'll use Summon Storm to avoid confusion with the earlier discussed Force Lightning variant, Summon Storm telekinetically manipulated atmospheric conditions to create a storm. The effect obviously could not be used indoors, but it could certainly have different effects based on climate and environment. Temperate climates could give rise to heavy rain and lightning, deserts could spawn dangerous sandstorms, and Arctic climates could result in blizzards and hailstorms. By amplifying one's dark power with special Sith crystals, a skilled user could purge the core from a star, creating an enormous explosion. This explosion could wipe out entire fleets of starships, but it was difficult to control, and many lesser users fell prey to the ability themselves. The Thought Bomb was a wicked technique that, through the unified power of many Darksiders, unleashed the pure destructive power of the dark side. When it detonated, it completely annihilated every Force-sensitive being caught in the blast, destroying their bodies and capturing their shattered souls in a silvery orb, swirling and spinning and inflicting eternal torment. The most notable execution of this ability was by Darth Bane, who tricked his fellow Sith into detonating a thought bomb on Ruusan, where all but Bane were wiped out, as the first step to establishing a new Sith order, the Rule of Two. Over a millennium later, the trapped Jedi spirits were freed when they were found by Kyle Katarn. As the name implies, this ability created actual darkness that greatly restricted sight and often gave off a horrible roaring sound. These waves of darkness instilled a primal sense of despair and confusion. Like with the light side and neutral powers, there are a bunch of dark side powers that are so underdeveloped that they don't have a place on the list proper. We'll speed run through them now. Ready? Let's go. Alter Reality was a theoretical force power that allowed the user to reshape reality entirely, making the universe suit them. Darth Sidious hoped to learn this ability, but never did before his death. Dark Aura filled the air around and above the user with hateful dark side energy, slowing those nearby. False light side aura cloaked a dark side user in an aura of the light side, making them feel to other Force sensitives like they were light in nature. Darth Zana used this ability to sneak into the Jedi archives on Coruscant, past countless Jedi. Force shadows were projections that a Darksider could conjure, allowing them to see through the shadow's eyes even across vast distances. These shadows were usually invisible, but certain individuals could detect their presence. Similar to the neutral ability Fold Space, Force Travel allowed a user to travel vast distances instantly by tearing a hole in the fabric of reality and passing through. Force Wound was effectively a lesser version of Force Kill, telekinetically targeting a victim's organs and inflicting damage. Heart Stun was a further variation on Wound and Kill, specifically targeting the victim's heart, though it could also slow a subject's heart to induce a sort of stasis. Dooku may have used this ability to keep General Grievous alive after his sabotaged ship crashed, resulting in the Kaleesh warlord's transformation into the horrid mechanical monstrosity. Injure Kill let a user specifically damage a subject's body part through physical contact. Malicious Fury drained the willpower of a nearby target, empowering the user at the same time. Mind Shard was a telepathic power that racked a target with pain as their mind was splintered, often breaking their focus. Darth Bane claimed that this was a useful power for Sith to learn. The Path of Blood and the Ritual of the Power of the Dark were darkside powers that specifically target Chihala trees, Force-sensitive trees from the planet of Kularin. The Path of Blood was used specifically to slay these trees, while the Ritual of the Power of the Dark was used to turn them to the dark side. Finally, a Sith Stone Ritual was a recitation that turned a user's victim to stone, leaving their body permanently immobile and their soul in eternal torment. Rai Nimbus stole the ritual from his Sith master Darth Kaldus in an attempt to kill his master, but Kaldus had anticipated it and changed the words. When Nimbus spoke the words, he was turned to stone instead. Wow, this video ended up being way bigger than I was anticipating, but like I said in the Neutral Powers video, I believe in being thorough. I'm not one of those channels that teases you with a video, then baits you into a part 2 and a part 3. You get what you click on with me. So, what is your favorite Darkseid power? What do you think is the most sinister? Did I miss any important Darkseid powers? Let me know down in the comments. Continuing with the Darkseid, next time we're going to look at a really cool Darkseid creature that even the greatest of Jedi were wary of. After that, we'll get back into the Out of the Spotlight series with a Naruto character that I've liked for years. Thank you so much for watching. Long videos like this can get a bit excessive, so if you're still watching, I deeply thank you. If you liked what you just watched, please consider liking, leaving a comment, and subscribing. It all really helps out, and it's the best way to support me and what I do here on the channel. I love making these videos, but I'm just one person. I don't have an editor or fancy software or anything, so any support you can give in the form of likes, comments, and subscribing really, really helps. There's a new video every single Friday. Click here or here if you want to check out the videos on every single light side power or on every neutral power. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.